Yes, sir. Yeah. Adonai did a work himself. Yeah. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. Correct. Mm-hmm. No, because in the first century with Paul, Paul's disciples, the ones that Paul decided to disciple, first of all, was Timothy. Timothy was called to pastor, but Timothy was half Jewish and half Gentile. But Titus was full Gentile. So Paul called him to be a pastor. So here in the first century, we have a half Jewish, half Gentile pastor, pastoring congregations that were Jewish and Gentile. But we also have Titus, a full Gentile, pastoring congregations that are, you know, Jewish and Gentile. Because for all the time that the apostles lived, the congregations were both Jewish, Gentile. They hadn't become Gentile all the way. So precedent, again, always remember, precedent has a loud voice. Precedent means that in the first century, Paul the apostle, allowed, and through the Holy Spirit, 2 letters, one to half Jew, half Gentile, and one to full Gentile, to be pastors of congregations. So anybody can be a pastor if he has the calling and the sending, the qualifications, which both Timothy and Titus give us the qualifications, the calling and the sending. And so as long as you have that, it doesn't matter, not only in the Gentile side as apart from Jew, but any Gentile of any color, of any race, of any, we don't know if Titus was Greek or Roman, probably a Roman. And we think that Timothy's father was half Roman, half his mother was his father was Jewish, and he was half. His father was Gentile, and his mother was Jewish, so he was half and half. So, yes, sir. I'll tell you what, we're going to have a baptism at the end. Who's getting baptized? Phil's getting baptized. So, so I'll tell you what, right when, before we break, that'll be our I'm going to talk a little bit about baptism, and then I'll talk about the formula. So, was there, yes, sir? It didn't matter. No. And the qualifications that he gives them for the followers of them, their disciples, means that they knew the word. They had to know the word. And remember, the word there wasn't the New Testament. The word was Torah. If you didn't know Torah, you were not able to be a teacher. And today, we have, most pastors don't know Torah. In fact, most pastors that are out there preaching do not know Torah. What's that? Oh, it's been done away with, yeah. Been done away with, yeah. Yes, sir. Mhm. Right, yeah. They don't believe. In fact, see, that's why the MJAA, who is also associated with the UMJC, they're working together. Will not allow me to be a pastor. We could put this congregation under them, they said, but they would have to send a Jewish pastor, rabbi, to be the rabbi here, and I could be an elder, but I could never be a pastor. So they would take my stripes out. Yeah. Yes, and the last three rabbis, before they were rabbis there, they were members of Calvary Chapel. So they will get Calvary Chapel Jews and ordain them rabbi of the congregation. But they're all come from a Christian Calvary Chapel mentality. So, right. Yeah. Now, we went there incognito about 2 months ago, me and Mr. T. Well, we sat in the back. Everybody, including the pastor, came to say hello to us. But I was really surprised that it was very Christian-y, and the hymns were Christian hymns. The one that I couldn't figure out that they sang was a hymn that is sung at funerals, which is a good hymn for funerals to comfort the bereaved. But at a Messianic congregation, that one, it is well with my soul. You guys know that one? They sang that one, and that surprised me, that they were singing a lot of, again, I really don't want to, I guess part of the thing that they're more Jewish, but they're more Christian. They're more rabbinic, but they're more Christian. They're Christian rabbinic. Very strange. Yes, sir. Wow. Yes, in Matthew 23, it speaks of not calling anybody rabbi, not calling anybody father, not calling anybody teacher. Now, what's interesting, if you look at those words just straight out, and those are the only verses that there are, you would obey them. The only problem is throughout the rest of the New Testament and the apostolic writings, those titles are used by the apostles themselves. And for example, Paul says, you don't have many fathers, but I am your father. So that's where the Catholic priest says, well, yeah, Yeshua said that, but he didn't mean call no man father, because do you call your father father? Do you call him dad? Do you call him Abba? Those are different for the same thing. But Paul calls himself a father in the faith to them. And then, of course, when the fivefold ministry of apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, teacher, the word teacher there in Hebrew, if you look at your Hebrew Bible in there, it's the word Rav, which the word Rav means teacher. The word Rav, Ravi means my teacher, but the word Rav means teacher. And the word teacher, didaskalos in Greek, and Rav are interchangeable in many places. So you have sometimes didaskalos and sometimes Rav. So in the apostolic writings, you do have times when these people were called Rav, father, teacher, didaskalos. So there's a confusing thing with many congregations. I do not like, I will not call myself rabbi, or I won't put Rabbi Dennis Otero. But if I put Dr. Dennis Otero, what does the word doctor mean? The word doctor comes from doctrine, doctrina, teaching, Torah. So it means a Torah teacher. But the Hebrew designation for doctor is Rav again. So Rav is a doctor. So anyone who has a doctorate is a Rav. So then you get back to the same thing. Well, then should we not use doctor? Now, when I was a priest, we, Father Dennis or Reverend Dennis. I've never liked Father or Reverend. Even back then, we had right reverends, most blessed Reverend, most extraordinary right Reverend, very right Reverend. But I think there are some titles that are not biblical, but if they're a biblical title, because this is who you are a pastor, you're a teacher. But because of this verse, I won't use rabbi. Now, when people call me rabbi, a lot of people call me rabbi. If I do have the time, I'll, explain to them, just call me pastor or Dr. Otero. To kind of, because a lot of people mind if they call you rabbi, but if they call you the Latin designation of rabbi, doctor, they don't mind it. But it's the same thing. So. Yes, there's been several Jewish popes. In fact, there's been many Jewish clergy within the Catholic Church for many, many years. Yeah, yeah.
When I read that section, what I get from it is that at that time people would put themselves under the authority of somebody and believe whatever they were told.
You know. In here uh, now, Moshe. Most of you know Moshe. For those of you that don't know Moshe, you'll meet him for Sukkot. He is a Christian jeweler. Anybody have his jewelry on you right now? Look at that. A lot of you guys here. He's a Christian jeweler from Israel, and he comes every Sukkot. And every time he comes, he definitely, now, he has studied rabbinically many, many years and is a rabbi in his own right. And he is a Sephardic Jewish person from Israel. His father and mother, he was born in Jerusalem. And he belongs to several really big Jewish congregations. And every time he comes here, he calls me rabbi and tells all you guys, call him rabbi. He's a rabbi. He's a real rabbi. And he is totally upset at most of the rabbis that he's ever known in Israel and here. He says most American rabbis aren't rabbis. He says they're pastors. You, on the other hand, he says you're a rabbi. But I keep telling him, you know what? Especially among Messianic congregations, Adat and other congregations, I will not use rabbi here in Albuquerque because they will ask me, show me your credentials. I do not have rabbinical credentials. Now, they don't either. They just have a certificate that says the congregation made him the rabbi. So, but they never went to rabbinical school or anything like that. But if I were to go to Israel, or especially with a traditional Reform, conservative, Orthodox congregation, and I were to use rabbi, they could use that against the Messianic and say, see, you guys just take up our names and all you guys want to do is, you know, be rabbi wannabe or stuff like that. So I keep telling him politically, it's not expedient for me to use rabbi even for those purposes. Then he told me, well, then come to Jerusalem. If you come to Jerusalem, I have 3 rabbis, because it takes 3 rabbis to make someone a rabbi. He says, I have 3 rabbis that I've already talked about you, and they'll make you a rabbi right away, and your rabbinical standing will be higher than theirs, because according to Orthodox Judaism, any rabbi has to go to Jerusalem. Only in Jerusalem can you be ordained a rabbi. So if you're ordained a rabbi outside of Jerusalem, it doesn't count to them. So he says, I'll have 3 rabbis ordain you here. And he says, if you have any friends, and I have a lot of friends there in Jerusalem. In fact, did that guy that said he knew me from Hebrew University tell you what his name was? I've always been interested too. Because when Sebastian was taking Hebrew, I think he had mentioned, did he mention to you he knew who I was? Oh. Yeah. And that's a good John name in Israel. Well, no, they will not ordain a Gentile a rabbi. But he knows. In fact, when I showed him my pedigree, what he did is he went to where this center is. He went to the main center and checked it out. And then next time he came and he bowed to me. And he says, I said, no, what are you doing? He bows and says, this is your father's line? I said, yeah, that's my father. He says, this line belongs to such and such. He gave me the name of these rabbis and said, and I told, no, we don't believe in that. But he checked it out himself, and he knew who my ancestry was. But, yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Yes, because there are certain peoples within not just the Messianic, but uh, Pentecostalism and other groups that do not believe, and several people here have already told me, uh, I'm not going to call you pastor or teacher or whatever because we don't believe that, calling anybody anything. So, but that's them. Yes, sir. Yes. He's what? Oh, Reconstructionist, correct. A Reconstructionist Jew is the lowest denomination or the lowest group in the totem pole of Jewishness. The Orthodox being the top, and then the conservative, then the Reform, and then the Reconstructionist. A Reconstructionist is very liberal, and they're the ones that have the female rabbis. They're by the way, you know how we're going to have that pro-life rally? Our biggest opponents in pro-life ministry is all the Jews in Albuquerque. Every Jew, Orthodox, conservative, rabbinical. Here in town, there is an organization called the Ministerial Alliance for Reproductive Rights. The Ministerial Alliance for Reproductive Rights. And it's led by the Jewish organizations. All the Jewish rabbis here in town were part of that. I don't know about Chabad, but all the Rabbi Black, and I don't know who the new rabbis are now. I haven't kept up with them, but when I was with the police, Rabbi Black and some of these other rabbis from all these congregations, and almost, I was the only one, me and Pastor Mansfield from New Beginnings were the only ones that were not part of the Ministerial Alliance for Reproductive Rights. All the other pastors here in town were all the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, Congregationalists, they were all part of that, or else they weren't pro-life, but most of them were. But every synagogue in town is pro-abortion. Every synagogue is pro-abortion. Yes, ma'am. You had a question.
Yeah, well, it was about the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
Do they believe, like right now, that they're in the millennium and their kingdom is already set up?
Correct. The Catholic Church is amillennial, which means there's not going to be no literal millennium. The Catholic Church is the kingdom of God on earth, and the Pope is called the Vicar of Christ. The word vicar is the Latin word for the Greek anti, or instead of Christ. So he is Christ's representative on earth. In other words, he's actually saying he's the Antichrist. And because remember, an Antichrist in the Greek is not against Christ, but it's the one instead of Christ. And so he calls himself the Vicar of Christ here on earth. So he's reigning in Christ's stead. And at the end, there's just going to be a general resurrection of the living and the dead. And it's over with.
So then is this America, Babylon?
No, I would not say America's Babylon. Babylon, the final Babylon, is going to be the whole world under a one world system where this one man or two men, one is going to be political, economic, and the other is going to be religious. And all the churches, all the religions, all the economy, all the government is going to be under that. That's why we really need to pray, because technically that's where the world is heading to. This idea of one worldism, this idea of even the whole liberal agenda, um, which is, I'm starting to see, you know, like you have the feet of clay and iron, and as clay and iron don't mix, so will they not mix, it says in Daniel, in the seed of a man. But what's interesting is the whole world, and I can't understand this. Think of it. All the liberals are pro-Muslim, but all the liberals are also pro-gay. Muslim and gayness do not mix. They will never mix. So they're mixing in all these groups that really can't mix. And they're going to have a sense of unity, but at some point in time, that unity is going to be broken. And they will have one of them is going to take over. And the anti-Messiah, which is the person that Israel picks, remember, always remember this. The only way to know who the Messiah is, to wait on Israel, and when Israel decides this person is the Messiah and he's going to rebuild our temple, that's the Antichrist. That's the anti-Messiah. Because only Israel can choose him. Nobody could choose him, only Israel could choose him. And this guy is going to keep the world at equilibrium, even though it's totally until Yeshua comes and destroys that kingdom. Well, the popes throughout history have been antichrists, just like there's been political antichrists, Hitler, all these people, but we can't say Germany is the antichrist. But at one time, Germany had an antichrist. And at any, right now, there are antichrists, many antichrists, religious and political, economic. Soros, I believe, is an antichrist. I believe Obama is an antichrist. All these people, I believe, are antichrists. But the antichrist, the anti-Messiah, that one that will come at that specific time, that specific place, the guy that comes into Jerusalem and says, I am Elohim, that one, whether he's alive or not yet born yet, I don't know. But I don't want to get into like the Seventh-day Adventist church. Anybody here, you don't have to raise your hand, but anybody Seventh-day Adventist, they had a whole anti-Catholic Church campaign for many years. And they're the ones that are sending you those books about the Sunday law. I don't know if any of you have gotten one of those. They're sending them almost to every house, the Sunday law. And they are very anti-Catholic. They believe that the Pope is the Antichrist and the Catholic Church is. But Mary Baker Eddy had these visions, not Mary Baker, Ellen White had these visions, and through that came all this anti-Catholicism. We can't be anti-anything because there are people, regardless of what group they are, that are true believers that we're going to see in heaven. Just because someone belongs to a particular group. In fact, there's going to be people from the Amazon that are going to be in the heavens with us, and all in the new earth, I should say, with us. So that judgment, we have to be careful that we don't say, well, every Catholic is, lost and an antichrist. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what the first thing he'll do is he'll set up the 7-year covenant, and then after that he'll. Yes, ma'am. And actually, the term Messiah is used for Cyrus, because there in Isaiah, he says, I have called my Messiah. So Yahweh uses the term my Messiah for Cyrus. So from a Hebrew point of view, not so much Jewish, but from a Hebrew point of view, the term Messiah is used for anyone whom Adonai has called and anointed to do a specific work. So Cyrus was called to be, at that point, the chosen one, anointed by Adonai himself, to bring the Jewish people back. And in many ways, if Trump does things pro, then we could look upon even him as a type of Messiah. But if anybody does against, then we could look upon him as a type of the anti-Messiah until the real one comes. And remember, all these guys were just types until the real one comes. That's a good point. Yes, sir. Oh, Nathaniel Barak. When I was doing what? Peter's house. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Yeah. That was in Bethsaida, the city of Bethsaida. Yeah. Can you remember his name? Write his name down. Oh, one of the things that, from a messianic perspective, that we have is, and we'll just do this one and then we'll do the baptism. But there is a 7-year covenant where the anti-Messiah will make a covenant with Israel for 7 years. In the middle of the 7 years, which 3.5 and 3.5, he will break the covenant and he will set up the abomination of desolation. Christianity, in its evangelical form, believes that the rapture is going to happen here and the second coming 7 years later. In the Messianic feast model, we believe that the Feast of Trumpets is going to be here 10 days, and then the Feast of Yom Kippur, and then 5 days, and then the Feast of Tabernacles, and then the millennium. Dispensational theology teaches Hal Lindsey, most evangelicals today, a pre-trib rapture. The tribulation is going to be 7 years. Well, there is going to be times of sorrow and different situations going for the 7 years, but the resurrection rapture will happen 10 days before the second coming, not over here. And the feasts are the proof of that. Because if the first 4 feasts happen exactly by the day, the 14th, the 15th, 3 days, 3 nights, 50 days later, and Yeshua fulfilled those to the day, then the last 3 feasts are going to be fulfilled to the day. And if they're going to be fulfilled to the day, then the Feast of Trumpets, 10 days later, that's second coming. Resurrection, second coming. 5 days later, the millennium starts. So a 10-day wrath of of Adonai against the anti-Messiah. Most of this is going to be the anti-Messiah's wrath on the Kehillah and Yeshua. And of course, throughout this time, Yeshua is going to allow certain judgments to come upon the world. But the wrath, the cup, the day of the cup, Yom Yahweh, the day of Yahweh, the day of the Lord in King James, it's only 10 days long. And that will be the extreme tribulation where the wrath of Adonai is poured out on the anti-Messiah. So. Yeah, that's the term that Del Sanchez used. In fact, he actually wrote a book called The Greater Exodus, where he believes that. And yes, in fact, I believe we are part of those prophecies that in the last days he's going to blow the shofar and he's going to call from the north, south, east, and west his people back home. And I do believe that people from everywhere are going back home. That's what Dr. Del Sanchez is working for. And I do believe that's going to occur. I guess it could be called a greater exodus or a second exodus or a return, a last day's return to the land, which is happening right now. Many people from all over the world are finding out, you know, their Hebraicness, their Jewishness. Now, what we need to be careful, though, is there's a lot of Gentiles that are claiming that they are Israel. So now, many of these people are making application to Israel as I'm from the tribe of Dan, or I'm from the tribe of Asher. How do you know? The Holy Spirit told me I'm from the tribe of Asher, so I want to come back. And so Israel's having a hard time with some of these, what they call kooks, that are now saying they're from the lost 10 tribes and we want to have our home here. And they're all Christians. And it's a Christian thing that's happening, that a lot of Christians are now claiming to be from the tribe. So we have to be careful that we do talk about the return. And we know that in the book of Revelation, 144 JWs are going to be coming back. 144,000 are going to be coming back, right? Oh, I forgot an E. Actually, they're from 12,000 only from the Jews, and 12,000 from the rest of the non-Jewish. It's supposed to be a joke. People, groups, tribes. So there will be from all tribes. But remember, when that happens, this is something that Adonai is going to do, not denominations or not, you know, because like what they're saying is that, let's see, if you're French, you're from Reuben. If you're Irish, you're from Dan. If you're from Canada, you're Manasseh. But if you're from England, you are Ephraim. Because Ephraim to them is the top guy. Not Judah, Ephraim. So all English people are the real tribe, are the head tribe, because to them they believe Ephraim is the head tribe. And so the top is England, not the Jews, but England. So, and that's called the Ephraimite heresy or the Ephraimite doctrine. So be careful if anybody talks to you about Ephraim and stuff like that. Yes, sir. I'll tell you what, and because we're going to have a baptism, and I told them that we're going to have it right now. Let's go ahead and that'll be the first question next Wednesday. Okay. Tonight, you could take a seat for a second here. Tonight we are going to be having a baptism. Our brother is going to be getting baptized, and is a